Hello and welcome to my review of The Liar, a 1991 novel from author, actor and TV personality Stephen Fry. This was Fry's first novel. In the years following, he's written a handful more works of fiction without ever being what anyone would call prolific in the genre. The Liar begins with a scene in italics where two people, who the narrator refers to by their clothing, are witnesses to a murder in Austria. One of the characters is named as Adrian, and it is Adrian who will become the protagonist of the novel. The narrative, now no longer in italics and less focused on people's clothing, follows Adrian during his time at school. He's overtly camp, recounts a number of homosexual liaisons, and claims to be in love with another schoolboy called Hugo. He lives with a roommate called Gary and has a number of other friends, notably one Pig's Trotter. His lifestyle is somewhat bankrolled by money from his uncle David, and what follows are a string of incidents, few especially interesting, interspersed with occasional italics passages which hint at some sort of spying incident occurring. However, the main narrative is not told chronologically, though these asides seem to be. There are three main events in the early goings. Pigs tells Adrian that he's in love with him, and then commits suicide when Adrian offers nothing in return. Adrian, when questioned, will later claim that Pigs killed himself because he was in love with Hugo. Then Adrian writes a faux Dickens novel that he tries to pass off as the real thing, and finally he is expelled after playing a leading part in an unofficial school magazine that proves just a little too scandalous for the institution to tolerate. The narrative skips forward somewhat to Adrian at college, where he puts on a performance of his fake Dickens novel as a play, starring opposite Hugo, who has fallen on rough-ish times after Adrian blamed him for Trotter's death. Naturally, none of this would, apparently, be complete without more brief spy nonsense, and these scenes really start to grate long before Fry ditches them completely around the time the third act begins. Eventually, Adrian takes up teaching and coaching the school cricket team. This for me was one of the better scenes, when he psychologically demolishes a schoolboy bowler and helps his own team to a victory. It is also a scene that has been referred to previously by his mentor at school, Professor Trefusis. Trefusis is involved in a scandal, and Adrian agrees to travel Europe with him on a year-long sabbatical. On the way, the two contrive to tell each other their backstories, with Adrian recounting a period as a prostitute that ended with him in jail for possession of cocaine. The veracity of this section is later called into question by other characters. But the final act is a deluge of long-winded exposition as Trefusis explains his sabbatical as a front for a quest into Europe to recover a machine that will make it impossible for somebody to lie. All of the major international players would want a power like that, and one of them has apparently already killed for it, the murder the book opened with, by now some 250 pages removed from that event. But the big swap of the machine goes wrong and another man is murdered. The italics apparently have gone because this is now a spy caper, although one with only 30 pages left to run. But then it isn't, because it's over, and Trefusis has set up a sting in order to catch the real bad guy, which is none other than Adrian's uncle David, which Adrian knew because he was informing him of Trefusis' actions all along, which Trefusis knew all along, and which didn't matter because the machine didn't exist, and this was all just a game Sir David plays with Trefusis in order to pass the time now that the Cold War is over. A twist upon twist upon twist that is likely two twists too many, and certainly falls flat because Sir David has, to his unmasking, appeared in only one or two minor scenes. And unmasking a whodunit, as Agatha Christie says, and I paraphrase, is a participation sport. It only works when it is possible to guess who did it, or to want to guess who did it. The former is definitely not the case here, because as the mystery takes up so little of the book, it's not even obvious that there is one until it's all being unmasked. And in the latter's case, I found these scenes to be a minor irritation, as they got in the way of the main story, which is the biography of Adrian. And then they become the main narrative of the book, only during its least interesting part, and the most ponderously paced part at that. I suspect that the college stuff works so well because it is something Fry is far more familiar with than anything in the spy genre. Though the book makes it clear that he has read Le Carre, the final act is heavy with the asides of the swapped backstories and Trefusis' exposition, and These are all things that ordinarily you want in your first 2 acts, not your third. But Fry can't do that because The Liar is simply not about this spy stuff at all. It's just a cheap hook to try and make it appear that it's about anything. For long periods of the book, I had simply no idea what it was about, and that's why these spy inserts are there, is to keep reminding you that actually this is all going to mean something in the long run. Prior to the great reveal, I assumed it was simply a biography of Adrian, a smattering of largely unconnected incidents he caused, and little else. That's not to say that it isn't a good biography of Adrian, quite the opposite. He's an utter swine, unlikable and snide enough to be thoroughly engaging as a lead, and individual scenes work very well in that context. He has something of the Humbert about him, especially his early fixation on the slightly more youthful Hugo and revulsion at the signs of his ageing. Where Humbert refers to the 14-year-old Lolita as aging, Adrian twice meets Hugo after the school years are over. When they star in a play together, Hugo is now finding life a little bit of a struggle. Adrian, though happy enough to exploit him sexually, remarks the memory of him wouldn't be muddled by a sight like this alien Hugo who trembled and wept into his wine. And also he meets him at the cricket match. He looked different but the same. Adrian's eyes could see the real Cartwright not too far beneath the surface. Behind the strengthened features he saw the smoother lines of the boy. Within the firmer stride he read the former grace. His memory could scrub off 4 years of tarnish and restore the shining original, but no one else would have been able to. And there's certainly an intertextuality here with Nabokov. Humbert too fixates on a moment or a memory of Dolores rather than seeing her as an actual human being. But to what purpose? Nabokov's text was a condemnation of Humbert and clearly showed the catastrophic consequences of his actions, with the final twist revealing that all of The Liar was a game that neither player is about to end, the excision of Hugo from the text beyond the vaguely happy parting from Adrian, which happens earlier than this scene anyway. They all downplay the seriousness of his actions. The in-text suggestion that certain scenes are not true does the same. Though the cricket scene is a real highlight, its actual purpose is debatable. It is referenced a couple of times before actually treated to it, and I found his unpicking of Ellis, the opposing team's star player, to be amusing, but I wonder how accessible it will be to non-cricket fans. Ellis bowled a full toss which Froud hooked straight over the boundary. The short-leg fielder glared at Ellis. The ball had nearly decapitated him. It was a 6, said Hugo at square leg. For all the linguistic games Trefusis, Adrian and Fry indulge in, that cricket can seem like an inaccessible language of its own, seems to have passed them by. Ellis, his psyche undermined by Adrian, is taken off after 3 more catastrophic overs and retired to long on, blinking back tears and fending off the jeers of his home supporters on the boundary. Cricket, for Adrian. It's so character building. Fry's love for the most artistic and beautiful game ever devised is shared only by a small number of people around the world, and while I found the scene highly enjoyable, I wonder how many out there will share that view and how many will be lost in the game's jargon and reputation. And its positioning in the final act of the book again is questionable. It is hardly a great reveal of anything new or revelatory about the character or plot. Rather, it could be argued as filler. Likewise, the long deviations earlier when he contrives to watch the university's forbidden library of pornography, or when he spends an unhappy vacation working on a farm with 2 siblings. Sometimes Adrian caught them staring at each other in a manner which reminded him of the joke definition of a Cotswold virgin, an ugly girl under 12 who can run faster than her brother. Lucy was no beauty, but if the looks she exchanged with Tony were anything to go by, Adrian guessed that she was no sprinter either. This poking fun of each other by regional stereotypes is a very British form of humour. Again, I wonder how well it will travel and how jokes of incest in general will land where it doesn't. I also wonder if this demonstration of Fry, Adrian's rather verbose manner, is the best way of landing this joke. Regardless of delivery, the potato picking scene serves no purpose to the eventual plot, and these characters do not return in any meaningful way. In hindsight, it's a lengthy aside, whereas at the time, expecting no more than a biography, it was an amusing anecdote. Or perhaps it's simply one of those brilliant and pithy lines that the back cover reviewer describes. The best example of these lines across a 367-page novel is this one, with Adrian drinking Hugo's cheap wine. He remarks, "Very nice," said Adrian, sipping appreciatively. I wonder how they got the cat to sit on the bottle, because despite the literary review's insistence, this is not really a book of pithy one-liners for me, but more of amusing scenarios and situations. But it means that Fry's charm, rather than any great hilarity, is what is driving the book, to some degree of success. In conclusion, The Liar is a decent enough first novel. In truth, it is better to disappoint as a result of too much ambition than too little, and the spy plot here is the disappointment. The contrived ending is especially so. While, as mentioned, certain subject matter will excite controversy and some scenes may not work outside of certain audiences, The Liar does deliver some amusing moments. Adrian is one of those utter cads who can power through a novel like this. He is in turns a monster and strangely likeable, no small feat for a first-time author, even one leaning on the greats, as we've discussed. In the final tally of such things, I'd say that more scenes miss than hit, but all build up to a Bildungsroman that, via its engaging narrative, voice and lead, is a success overall. My harsher voice wants to call it a mediocre novel written by a witty and charming man. I just about liked it, but I struggle to see it having a very wide appeal.
My name is Riley and I'm a student. The first 2 weeks at Sexington University were perfectly normal. I was drunk until the end of freshers when my student loan ran out. Then Professor Lovecraft exploded his lab and my eyebrows and everything changed. My roommate started dying. Aliens invaded. I killed a dragon over breakfast, got stranded in the past and attacked by dinosaurs. I might have committed a genocide. I might have robbed an empire. I may even have saved the world. I really hope next week is quieter. I have an assignment due.